Go on. Death. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The wind cut sharply through the frozen valley, biting at every inch of exposed skin as he pressed forward. Snowflakes whipped against his face, stinging like needles, yet he moved with unwavering focus, each step calculated and deliberate. Every ridge, tree, and ice-covered boulder had been studied and memorized, forming a mental map of survival and opportunity. He crouched behind a jagged rock, eyes scanning the distance for any sign of movement, while the howling storm masked the faintest sounds of pursuit. He approached a frozen cliffside, jagged edges sparkling like fractured glass. Each step required careful testing, as a slip could mean instant death in the abyss below. He climbed with steady precision, hands gripping sharp icicles, toes probing narrow ledges. Enemy snipers moved along ridges above, but he had already anticipated their paths. With calculated movements, he neutralized threats silently, advancing upward while the ice and snow became both shield and weapon. A frozen waterfall loomed ahead, cascading ice glittering in the pale sunlight. He scaled it with painstaking care, muscles screaming, body trembling from cold and exertion. The roar of partially frozen water masked the faint sounds of distant enemies. At the summit, he crouched, surveying the valley below, every movement in his mind a strategy, every ridge and hollow a potential advantage. Nature itself became a weapon, amplifying his lethal precision. Night descended, blanketing the valley in darkness. The aurora borealis shimmered overhead, casting ethereal green and purple light across jagged ridges. He melted snow for water, muscles aching, breath ragged, yet his mind remained sharp. Shadows danced across icy slopes, each a potential threat or opportunity. He moved like a predator through this frozen wilderness, patient, calculated, and relentless, every step a measure of survival and mastery. Enemy reinforcements attempted a flanking maneuver through a narrow canyon. He triggered preset traps, sending snow and ice crashing into their path, scattering soldiers and creating chaos. He advanced silently, striking with precision and retreating before counterattack. Every movement was enhanced by the environment, each step part of a carefully orchestrated ballet of death and strategy. Survival was no longer a struggle, it was domination through intelligence and skill. A sudden blizzard engulfed the valley, reducing visibility to near zero. He moved cautiously, relying on memory and intuition to navigate the swirling chaos. Trees and rocks became markers, snowbanks hid traps, and the wind itself concealed his approach. Each step was deliberate, every motion executed with lethal intent. Even as exhaustion gnawed at his body, he pressed onward, relentless and unstoppable, a human force moving seamlessly with the storm and wilderness. He descended into a frozen canyon, jagged cliffs rising sharply on both sides. Enemy scouts attempted to ambush him, but he maneuvered flawlessly, using natural hazards as traps and cover. Falling ice, loose rocks, and snowdrifts disrupted pursuit, while he advanced silently, each step precise and calculated. Combat had become a symphony of patience, skill, and environmental mastery, every movement a testament to his relentless determination. The ridge ahead offered a commanding view of the valley below. Smoke from destroyed vehicles drifted across the frozen landscape, and debris from previous skirmishes littered the slopes. He paused briefly, muscles burning, body battered, but mind razor-sharp. Every enemy formation had been anticipated, every weakness exploited. The frozen wilderness bore witness to his relentless skill and mastery over both human and natural threats. Crossing a frozen river, he used the cracking ice to slow pursuing forces. Each step was precise, each movement calculated. The abyss below threatened instant death, yet he navigated with careful focus, balancing speed and caution. On the far bank, he crouched to observe remaining enemy positions, snow covering tracks and hiding traps. The environment itself became an extension of his tactical mind. A sudden avalanche thundered down a mountainside, snow and ice cascading violently. He rolled behind a boulder, using the chaos to advance undetected. Enemy forces struggled to adapt, shouting as snow and ice tumbled around them. He moved with lethal efficiency, using the terrain as both shield and weapon. Each action was amplified by the natural world, every movement precise and deadly. The aurora borealis flickered again, painting the frozen valley in green and purple light. He moved through a dense, frost-laden forest, moonlight glinting off ice-covered branches. Shadows became guides, trees became shields, and every movement was calculated for maximum stealth and efficiency. Enemy scouts were neutralized before they even realized he had approached. Survival and dominance were intertwined in every step. He approached a frozen canyon, cliffs towering above like jagged sentinels. Enemy forces tried to trap him, but he anticipated every maneuver. Using fallen logs, snowbanks, and ice formations, he created barriers and ambushes, turning the terrain into an ally. Each step was a negotiation with danger, a combination of strategy, strength, and instinct. Nature itself became a weapon in his hands. Climbing a jagged ridge, frost biting exposed skin, muscles screaming, he moved with calculated precision. Enemy snipers attempted to predict his path, but he had already memorized their positions. Shadows and ice formations became tools of stealth, every movement a blend of intelligence and lethal skill. The ridge provided a perfect vantage point for the final confrontation, a place to dictate the flow of battle. The frozen plain stretched endlessly under a dazzling sunrise. Enemy formations were scattered, morale shattered, and the remnants of conflict lay silent beneath the snow. He moved deliberately, surveying the aftermath, body battered but mind sharp. Every ridge and snowdrift bore witness to the relentless pursuit, skill, and unyielding determination that had defined his journey. He navigated a dense, icy forest, branches heavy with frost threatening to snap. Enemy scouts attempted ambushes, but he moved like a shadow, striking swiftly and retreating before retaliation. Each movement was precise, blending intelligence, skill, and instinct. Survival was a perfect balance of patience, speed, and calculated aggression. Snow swirled in violent gusts, obscuring vision and disorienting enemies. He pressed forward, using natural markers and subtle cues to maintain direction. Every movement was deliberate, each step optimized for efficiency. Exhaustion clawed at his body, yet he continued relentlessly, mastering both terrain and adversaries. A frozen cliffside loomed ahead, jagged edges glinting dangerously. He climbed with steady focus, hands gripping ice and rock, testing every foothold. Below, enemy forces shifted, unaware that he had already anticipated their moves. The cliff became both obstacle and tool, allowing him to strike, evade, and dominate the battlefield simultaneously. The frozen waterfall erupted violently, ice and snow crashing below. He rolled instinctively, using the chaos to advance undetected. Enemy soldiers struggled to respond, shouting over the deafening roar. He moved with lethal precision, using environmental hazards as both shield and weapon. Nature itself had become a partner in his strategy. The valley below was littered with smoke, debris, and the remnants of past skirmishes. He paused, surveying the aftermath, bruised and battered but mentally unbroken. Each ridge, tree, and snowdrift told the story of his survival, skill, and unyielding mastery over both wilderness and enemies. Finally, the northern horizon glowed with the first rays of dawn. He stepped into the open plains of snow, surveying the endless frozen expanse. Enemy forces were defeated, remnants scattered, leaving silence except for the wind. His body ached, covered in bruises and frostbite, but his spirit remained unbroken. Each step forward symbolized survival, vengeance, and the culmination of a journey through relentless challenges. The morning sun cast long shadows across the frozen valley, glittering off jagged ice and snow-covered ridges. He moved with cautious determination, surveying every ridge, hollow, and crevice for remaining threats. His body ached from frostbite, bruises, and exhaustion, but his mind was razor-sharp, calculating every possibility. Each step was deliberate, every motion measured, as he prepared for the final confrontation with the remnants of his enemies. He approached a frozen canyon, cliffs towering ominously on either side. Enemy forces had regrouped here, hoping the narrow path would give them an advantage. But he had anticipated this, using snowbanks and jagged rocks to create deadly traps along the way. He moved with silence, patience, and lethal precision, each movement a perfect combination of stealth, skill, and instinct. A sudden gust of wind blew snow into the canyon, creating a swirling white haze. He used the storm to mask his approach, advancing closer to enemy positions. Each footstep was calculated, each movement carefully choreographed to avoid detection. He struck at the closest enemy silently, a shadow disappearing into the blizzard before any reaction could occur. Chaos erupted as others scrambled to respond, but he had already vanished into the icy landscape. He climbed a narrow ridge, frost biting deeply into exposed skin. The ridge overlooked the valley floor, providing a perfect vantage point. Enemy forces moved into the canyon below, unaware of the predator above. With precision, he triggered rocks and ice to fall strategically, causing panic and disarray. Every movement was deliberate, every strike amplified by the unforgiving terrain. A frozen waterfall erupted violently below, ice and snow crashing down in a deafening roar. He rolled behind a boulder, using the chaos to advance undetected. Enemy soldiers shouted in confusion, bullets ricocheting off ice and snow. He moved like a ghost, using environmental hazards as weapons, each step turning chaos into tactical advantage. The northern lights shimmered overhead, green and purple streaks dancing across the frozen sky. He moved through a dense, frost-covered forest, using the shadows and moonlight to his advantage. Branches creaked ominously, but he navigated with perfect balance, striking at enemies before disappearing into the wilderness. Each encounter was a dance of stealth, intelligence, and lethal skill. He crossed a frozen river, cracking ice groaning underfoot. One wrong step could mean death, but he advanced with careful precision. On the far bank, he crouched behind a fallen tree, observing enemy movements. Snow covered his tracks, hiding traps, and masking his presence. The environment was not a challenge anymore, it was an ally, bending to his mastery. A blizzard swept across the valley, visibility near zero. He pressed forward, relying on intuition, memory, and subtle environmental cues to guide him. Trees, rocks, and snowbanks became markers, hiding deadly traps from pursuing forces. Each movement was precise, deliberate, and optimized for efficiency. Exhaustion gnawed at him, but he moved like a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. He descended into a jagged canyon, cliffs looming like sentinels. Enemy scouts attempted to box him in, but he maneuvered flawlessly, turning natural hazards into weapons. Snowdrifts, ice formations, and fallen trees became obstacles for pursuers, while providing cover for him. Combat became a symphony of calculation, patience, and precision. The ridge above offered a commanding view of the valley below. Smoke drifted from destroyed vehicles, and remnants of skirmishes littered the frozen landscape. He paused briefly, muscles screaming, body battered, mind unbroken. Every enemy movement had been predicted, every weakness exploited. The frozen wilderness had become both stage and weapon, amplifying his mastery. He climbed a steep ice-covered slope, fingernails numb, fingers raw. Enemy snipers attempted to predict his route, but he had already memorized their positions. Shadows, jagged ice, and terrain became tools for stealth and strategy. Each movement was precise, calculated, and lethal. The ridge would become the decisive point of the final confrontation. The frozen plain stretched endlessly below, dazzling in the sunrise. Enemy forces were broken, scattered, morale shattered. He advanced deliberately, surveying the battlefield with keen eyes. Each ridge, snowdrift, and ice formation bore witness to his relentless pursuit, skill, and mastery over human and environmental forces. A frozen forest blocked the final path to his ultimate objective. Branches heavy with snow threatened to collapse at the slightest touch. Enemy scouts attempted ambushes, but he moved with unmatched precision, striking swiftly and retreating into cover before retaliation. Each step was a blend of intelligence, instinct, and lethal skill. Snow swirled in violent gusts, obscuring vision and confusing enemies. He used the storm as camouflage, advancing relentlessly toward the heart of enemy territory. Every movement was optimized for efficiency, every strike precise and deadly. Fatigue gnawed at him, but he pressed forward, unstoppable, mastering both nature and human adversaries. He approached a frozen cliffside, jagged ice glinting dangerously. Each step required balance and focus, yet he moved with fluidity and control. Enemy patrols shifted below, unaware that he had already predicted their paths. The cliff became a tool, a weapon, and a stage for the final acts of his mission. The frozen waterfall erupted violently, ice and snow tumbling downward. He rolled instinctively, using the commotion to move undetected. Enemy soldiers shouted in confusion, scrambling as snow and ice fell around them. Each movement was amplified by nature, each step transforming the environment into a weapon. The valley below was littered with debris and smoke. He paused briefly, surveying the aftermath, body bruised and battered, mind sharp and unbroken. Each ridge, tree, and snowdrift told the story of relentless survival, skill, and unyielding determination. The northern horizon glowed with the first light of dawn. He stepped into the open snow-covered plains, surveying the endless frozen expanse. Enemy forces were defeated, scattered, leaving only the whisper of the wind. His body ached, frostbite stinging, bruises raw, yet his spirit remained unbroken. Each step forward symbolized survival, vengeance, and the completion of a journey through relentless trials. He paused atop a ridge, breathing heavily, the wind carrying whispers of the battles behind him. His eyes scanned the horizon, the frozen wilderness stretching infinitely. Snow and ice bore witness to the trials, struggles, and victories etched into every ridge and valley. This land had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately acknowledged his mastery. Every step down the ridge was deliberate, cautious, yet purposeful. The remnants of enemies had been dealt with, and the path ahead was open. Each snowdrift, icy cliff, and frozen river had been navigated, every trap anticipated, and every challenge overcome. The wilderness itself had become a silent companion, aiding his survival and amplifying his determination. He crossed the final frozen plain, the sun rising higher, illuminating the pristine white snow. The battlefield was silent except for the wind. The once hostile valley now lay still, testament to his skill, endurance, and unyielding will. Exhausted, battered, yet victorious, he pressed forward, each step a declaration of survival and mastery. A frozen canyon loomed ahead, the last natural obstacle. He approached with calculated caution, each movement optimized to minimize risk. Enemy remnants had attempted to regroup, but the traps, snowdrifts, and terrain had ensured their failure. Every step brought him closer to completion, the culmination of relentless pursuit, skill, and strategy. At the canyon's edge, he paused briefly, surveying the entire frozen valley from above. Smoke rose faintly from distant wreckage, the silence punctuated only by the howling wind. His journey had been long, brutal, and unrelenting, yet he had endured. Each ridge, each tree, each snowdrift told the story of survival against impossible odds. He descended cautiously into the canyon, aware of every potential threat. Snow and ice shifted beneath his weight, yet he moved with unmatched precision. Enemy remnants had scattered, the traps had worked, and the wilderness had become both ally and weapon. Each motion, each step was executed with perfect calculation, combining instinct, intelligence, and skill. Finally, the valley opened into a wide frozen expanse, the sun illuminating sparkling ice and pristine snow. He paused, taking in the aftermath of the relentless struggle, muscles aching, body battered, yet spirit unbroken. Enemy forces had been defeated, scattered, and eliminated. The frozen land was silent, bearing witness to the endurance, mastery, and relentless determination of one man. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the frozen valley, turning the snow and ice into a blinding tapestry of white and silver. He stood silently, surveying the vast expanse that had been both battlefield and proving ground. Every ridge, every frozen river, every jagged cliff told the story of struggle and survival, victories won and sacrifices endured. His breath rose in clouds into the crisp air, a testament to life surviving the harshest tests. He moved slowly through the remnants of the battlefield, each step deliberate, almost reverential. Scattered debris, remnants of enemy encampments, and frozen tracks marked the path of conflict. He inspected traps he had set, seeing how the environment had aligned with his strategy to turn nature into both shield and weapon. Even in the aftermath, he felt the pulse of the wilderness, a silent acknowledgement of his mastery and endurance. A quiet wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the faint sounds of wildlife returning to the frozen land. Wolves howled in the distance, birds stirred, and the forest began to breathe once more. He paused, listening, reflecting on the symbiosis of survival, how the land, the struggle, and his own relentless will had interwoven to create a story of dominance and endurance. The frozen wilderness had tested him at every turn, and he had emerged victorious. He crossed the last frozen river, ice cracking softly beneath his boots. The reflections of the rising sun danced across the surface, and he paused to take in the moment. Every obstacle he had faced, every enemy encounter, every moment of near death had culminated in this serene, yet powerful, scene. A sense of peace, hard-earned and profound, settled over him as he pressed forward through the snow. He climbed to the top of a ridge one final time, the valley stretching endlessly before him. The landscape, once a hostile battlefield, now lay quiet and still. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, chest rising and falling, eyes scanning the horizon. The journey had tested every fiber of his being, yet here he stood, victorious, alive, and unbroken. Each step forward had been a testament to resilience and willpower. The frozen cliffs glistened in the sunlight, the last vestiges of ice shimmering like glass. He walked along the edge carefully, feeling the weight of both exhaustion and triumph. Every muscle in his body ached, but the mind remained sharp, clear, and proud. In the silence of the frozen wilderness, he could feel the echoes of every battle fought and every victory won, reverberating through the ice and snow. He descended gently into a snow-laden forest, the crunch of his boots muffled by thick layers of frost. Trees stood silently around him, heavy with ice and snow, witnesses to the journey's end. He paused, looking around, realizing that the land itself had become a part of his story. Every ridge, hollow, and frozen stream had shaped him, had demanded every ounce of his strength and skill, and now offered silent approval of his survival. A flock of birds rose into the sky as he approached a clearing, their wings cutting through the crisp air. He watched them fly for a moment, feeling a rare moment of calm wash over him. The valley had been a crucible, testing endurance, skill, and spirit. Now, with enemies defeated and the land quiet once more, he could feel the weight of all he had endured begin to settle, allowing the first flickers of relief and reflection to take hold. He paused at the edge of a frozen lake, its surface smooth and glimmering like polished crystal. He gazed at his reflection, a solitary figure marked by scars, bruises, and frostbite, yet unbroken and triumphant. The lake reflected not only his image, but the journey he had undertaken, the struggles, the confrontations, and the relentless pursuit of survival. A profound sense of closure settled over him, the culmination of countless trials now visible in the stillness of the frozen expanse. He moved slowly away from the lake, the sun now higher, warming the icy valley slightly. The frozen land, once a harsh and unforgiving adversary, now seemed to offer a quiet respect. Every ridge, cliff, and snowdrift bore the imprint of his journey, silent monuments to skill, perseverance, and resilience. His steps were careful but unhurried, each one a meditation on endurance, triumph, and the harsh beauty of the northern wilderness. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and ice. He paused to listen, feeling the pulse of the land around him. The battlefield was silent, nature reclaiming its domain. Snow and ice shifted gently in the wind, masking the traces of battle, yet every mark bore witness to his journey. In this silence, he felt a deep connection to the wilderness, a mutual recognition of strength, endurance, and survival. He climbed one final hill, the valley below stretching in frozen magnificence. Sunlight sparkled on the peaks, ice, and snow, highlighting the beauty and brutality of the environment he had conquered. He stopped, chest heaving, breath fogging in the cold air, and gazed out across the vast expanse. The journey was complete, enemies defeated, survival achieved, and mastery over the land confirmed. He descended into a gentle hollow, the snow crunching softly beneath his feet. The frozen land had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately acknowledged his presence. Each ridge, frozen river, and ice-covered tree had been a challenge and a lesson, and he had met them all with patience, skill, and relentless will. Now, the valley lay quiet, peaceful, and still, a testament to the culmination of his journey. He reached a small frozen waterfall, its icy cascade glittering under the morning sun. He paused to drink, the water melting from ice crystals with careful precision. Every movement had been deliberate, each step executed with focus and skill. The wilderness had been a crucible, but he had emerged forged, stronger, and unbroken. The journey's end was a quiet victory, marked not by applause, but by the serene acknowledgement of the land itself. The forest cleared, revealing distant mountains bathed in golden sunlight. He walked toward them slowly, each step measured, each breath heavy but steady. Every obstacle had been overcome, every battle fought, and every enemy defeated. The frozen valley had transformed from hostile adversary to silent witness, the snow and ice carrying the memory of survival, perseverance, and triumph. He paused near a frozen ridge, the wind tousling his hair, carrying faint echoes of the battles past. The valley was quiet, nature reclaiming its dominion. Every ridge, snowdrift, and ice-covered cliff bore witness to his journey. He exhaled slowly, feeling a deep sense of closure and accomplishment. Survival had not just been physical, it had been mental, emotional, and spiritual. A solitary wolf appeared at the edge of a clearing, its breath misting in the cold air. He paused to watch it, sensing a silent acknowledgement from the creature. The wilderness had been a partner, opponent, and teacher, and in its quiet acknowledgement, he felt a profound connection. The journey was complete, survival achieved, and mastery over the frozen land affirmed. The sun rose higher, illuminating the valley in a brilliant glow. The wind whispered through frozen trees and ridges, carrying the faint scent of pine and snow. He walked slowly, reflecting on every challenge, every enemy defeated, every obstacle overcome. The frozen wilderness, once a battlefield, now lay serene, a monument to endurance, skill, and unbroken will. He reached the edge of the valley, the horizon opening to distant mountains. Snow and ice glimmered in the sunlight, and he paused, taking in the vast, unbroken expanse. Each ridge, river, and cliff told the story of his journey, a testament to survival, perseverance, and triumph. The land was quiet, the enemies gone, and the trials complete. The final moments were quiet, reflective, and powerful. He stood on a ridge overlooking the icy expanse stretched endlessly, a barren wilderness where snow and wind dominated all. Jagged cliffs and frozen rivers made every step perilous. Amid this frozen world, he moved with careful precision, scanning ridges and valleys for the slightest sign of movement. Every crunch of snow beneath his boots was measured, every breath deliberate. The wilderness was a crucible, and he had entered it to prove his mastery of both skill and survival. A frozen waterfall loomed ahead, icicles like knives hanging over a cliffside. He scaled it with calculated movements, fingers gripping jagged edges while boots found narrow footholds. The roar of partially frozen water masked the faintest sounds of enemies below. He paused at a ledge, muscles screaming from exertion, eyes scanning the valley. Each ridge, hollow, and snowbank had become a mental map, every movement a step toward survival. Snow swirled in violent gusts, reducing visibility to near zero. He moved cautiously, relying on memory and intuition to navigate the chaos. Trees and rocks became markers, snowbanks concealed traps, and the wind itself became a shield for his approach. Every step was deliberate, every movement precise, a perfect blend of skill, instinct, and intelligence. The wilderness had become both enemy and ally, a force to challenge and amplify his strength. Enemy forces advanced through a narrow canyon, hoping to trap him. He anticipated their moves, using snowdrifts and fallen ice as obstacles. A trap triggered, sending rocks and ice tumbling, scattering them in chaos. He struck with deadly efficiency, a shadow among the white, disappearing before retaliation. Each movement was amplified by terrain, the environment bending to his mastery. Night fell, and the aurora borealis lit the sky in vivid green and purple. He paused, melting snow for water, muscles aching, breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Every shadow, every sound, every creaking branch was analyzed. He moved like a predator, patient, precise, and unstoppable, blending seamlessly with the frozen wilderness. Survival was not just instinct, it was art. He climbed narrow ridges, frost gnawing at skin, muscles burning with effort. Enemy snipers attempted to predict his path, but he had memorized every position. Shadows and jagged rocks became tools, each movement calculated and lethal. The ridge offered a commanding view of the valley below, a perfect stage for the final acts of confrontation. Crossing frozen rivers, the ice groaned ominously. Each step was a risk, each movement a test of precision. The abyss below threatened instant death, yet he navigated with balance and focus. On the far bank, he paused, snow masking tracks and hiding traps. The wilderness itself had become an extension of his mind, each ridge and hollow part of a strategy to dominate both enemy and terrain. A sudden avalanche thundered down the mountainside, snow and ice cascading like a living wall. He dove behind a boulder, letting the chaos conceal his movements. Enemy forces scrambled, shouting over the deafening roar. He moved with lethal precision, using the avalanche to his advantage. Every action was enhanced by the terrain, each motion a blend of instinct, intelligence, and skill. The frozen forest loomed, branches heavy with ice and snow. Enemy scouts tried ambushes, but he moved like a ghost, striking isolated enemies before disappearing into the shadows. Each step, each strike, each retreat was executed with perfect precision. Nature itself had become a partner, amplifying his lethality, guiding his strategy, and masking his movements. Ascending steep icy slopes, he paused to survey the valley below. Smoke rose from destroyed vehicles, snow scattered debris from previous skirmishes. His body ached, frostbite biting at exposed skin, yet his mind remained razor-sharp. Every enemy movement was anticipated, every ridge and hollow utilized as a tactical advantage. The frozen land had become a canvas on which he painted his mastery of survival and combat. He descended into a frozen canyon, jagged cliffs rising on either side. Enemy scouts attempted to trap him, but he navigated flawlessly, turning the terrain into weapons. Snowdrifts, ice formations, and fallen trees created obstacles for pursuers while providing cover for him. Each step was a negotiation with danger, every action deliberate and lethal, a symphony of patience, skill, and environmental mastery. The aurora borealis danced overhead as he moved through frost-laden trees. Shadows became guides, trees became shields, and every movement was executed with precision. Enemy scouts were eliminated before they even realized he was present. Survival had become a form of art, blending intelligence, skill, and instinct in every motion. He approached a frozen ridge, the path ahead treacherous with ice and snow. Enemy forces attempted flanking maneuvers, but he had already anticipated every move. Fallen trees, ice shards, and snowbanks were used strategically to disrupt pursuers and create tactical advantage. Each step forward was a blend of focus, patience, and lethal precision. Crossing frozen plains, sunlight reflecting off the snow, he advanced deliberately. Enemy forces were broken and scattered, morale shattered. Every ridge and snowdrift bore witness to his relentless pursuit and skill. The wilderness had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately acknowledged his mastery. A frozen lake mirrored his reflection as he paused to observe. Bruised, battered, and frostbitten, he looked at the man who had endured impossible trials and emerged victorious. The frozen wilderness, once hostile and unforgiving, now lay silent and serene. Survival had not been just physical, it had been mental, emotional, and spiritual, a testament to unyielding willpower. The wind whispered through frozen trees, carrying faint echoes of the battles behind him. Wildlife began returning, a lone wolf appearing at the edge of a clearing. He paused, sensing a silent acknowledgement from the creature, a recognition of endurance and skill. The valley, once hostile, now bore witness to victory, survival, and mastery. Sunlight painted the frozen valley in gold, glimmering on ice and snow. He walked slowly, reflecting on every challenge, enemy defeated, and obstacle overcome. Each step through this pristine, silent land was deliberate, a meditation on perseverance and triumph. The journey had tested every aspect of his being, and now, he stood victorious, unbroken, and complete. He climbed a final ridge, gazing out across the vast frozen expanse. Every enemy had been defeated, every trap set, every obstacle overcome. Snow and ice reflected the sun's rays, transforming the battlefield into a glittering monument of survival and endurance. He exhaled slowly, feeling a profound sense of closure and accomplishment. Finally, he descended into a gentle hollow, the last stretch of snow-covered land before the valley opened to distant mountains. He paused, absorbing the serene quiet, feeling the weight of triumph, exhaustion, and unyielding will. The frozen wilderness had challenged him, shaped him, and ultimately acknowledged his presence. Every ridge, frozen river, and ice-covered tree bore witness to his journey, a testament to resilience and mastery. The sun rose higher, illuminating the valley, turning snow and ice into a blinding reflection of victory. He moved slowly across the open plains, surveying the aftermath. The land was silent, the enemies defeated, the trials complete. Survival had been earned through skill, endurance, and unbroken determination, and now, he walked forward as a conqueror of both man and nature. He paused atop a ridge one final time, breathing deeply, eyes scanning the vast frozen horizon. Every hardship, every enemy defeated, every near-death experience flashed through his mind. The frozen land, once a crucible of struggle, now lay silent and serene, bearing witness to his triumph. Each step forward was a declaration of survival, resilience, and unyielding mastery. The journey through the frozen wilderness was over. The valley lay quiet, the ice glistening under the sun's rays. Every ridge, cliff, and snowdrift bore the imprint of his struggle, the marks of survival, and the proof of enduring mastery. He took one last look at the landscape, feeling a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. The battles were finished, the enemies defeated, and the frozen wilderness stood as silent testament to his journey. Entire valley, breathing in the crisp, cold air. Every hardship, every battle, every moment of near-death flashed through his mind. He had endured, survived, and conquered both the enemies and the unforgiving wilderness. The frozen land, once hostile, now lay peaceful, bearing silent witness to his journey. The frozen wind carried a biting chill that penetrated even the thickest layers of clothing, but he moved forward without hesitation. Every step left a fleeting imprint in the snow, soon erased by gusts that whipped across the valley. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by distant cracking ice. He paused atop a ridge, surveying the jagged terrain, noting subtle shifts in snow and shadow that might conceal movement. Survival had become instinct, every motion an extension of awareness sharpened by relentless adversity. He entered a narrow canyon where snow hung like powder on every ledge, threatening to fall at the slightest disturbance. He moved carefully, hands brushing against icy rock for balance, listening intently for the faintest sound. Enemy forces had been persistent, leaving traps and scattered signs of their attempts to anticipate his path. Yet he moved with foresight, turning each obstacle into advantage, each frozen hazard into a shield or weapon. A sudden glare of sunlight reflected off a frozen river, momentarily blinding him. He shielded his eyes and crouched behind a protruding rock. In that fleeting moment, he calculated the trajectory of enemy patrols that could appear from either side of the canyon. With the precision of a seasoned hunter, he advanced silently, every movement measured, blending into the reflective surfaces of ice and snow. Each step forward was a negotiation with death, but he moved without hesitation. The distant rumble of collapsing ice echoed through the mountains, signaling a natural avalanche. He paused to observe, understanding instinctively that he could turn this chaos into opportunity. With swift movements, he positioned himself so that pursuing enemies would be caught in the cascade. Snow exploded downward, and he moved with precise timing, disappearing from sight as chaos overtook the valley floor. The environment had become an ally, amplifying every tactical choice. Night approached again, this time bringing a bitter cold that clawed at every exposed limb. He crouched beneath a snow-laden pine, muscles screaming with fatigue. The stars above reflected off ice-coated branches, creating an eerie glow across the frozen ground. He reflected on the battles fought, the injuries sustained, and the lives of those he had encountered. Each memory fueled determination, every setback a lesson etched into his strategy for the final stages of survival. He crept along a ridge overlooking a frozen forest, shadows stretching across the snow like ghostly fingers. Enemy scouts patrolled below, unaware that he had memorized every possible path and blind spot. Using a fallen tree as cover, he advanced with lethal intent, striking before his presence could be detected. Each encounter was silent, precise, and absolute, a testament to the blend of instinct and intelligence that defined him. A frozen waterfall split the canyon, its icy surface glittering with refracted sunlight. He scaled it with careful precision, every foothold tested before committing weight. Behind him, enemy movements shifted, unaware that he had already anticipated their reactions. The icy cascade became both challenge and opportunity, allowing him to strike with unexpected advantage while remaining concealed from view. Survival was an intricate dance, performed with deadly skill. The wind shifted, bringing the faint scent of smoke from distant fires. He approached cautiously, aware that this could indicate both danger and opportunity. Each tree, snowdrift, and rock formation was noted as a potential tool or hazard. He navigated the frozen forest with the precision of a predator, moving silently, watching for any telltale signs of pursuit. Every step forward was deliberate, calculated, and optimized for both efficiency and safety. He descended into a frozen ravine where jagged ice formations jutted from every surface. Enemy remnants had attempted to block the path with traps and barriers. He evaluated each hazard with a practiced eye, using agility and timing to bypass or neutralize them. The frozen landscape, once an obstacle, became part of his strategy. He advanced with confidence, muscles taut, senses heightened, and mind focused entirely on survival and completion of his mission. A blizzard suddenly engulfed the valley, reducing visibility to almost nothing. He pressed forward regardless, relying on subtle environmental cues to maintain direction. Snow piled around rocks and trees, hiding crevices and potential traps. Each step was measured, each motion precise, executed with a level of awareness honed through countless trials. Even in chaos, he moved with calm determination, mastering both the storm and the terrain to his advantage. He reached a frozen ridge that overlooked the entire valley, the scale of the wilderness before him awe-inspiring and intimidating. Enemy remnants scrambled below, unaware that every trap he had set now controlled the flow of their movements. Snow and ice shifted under their weight, and he used the vantage point to orchestrate the final engagements with precise timing. The ridge became both shield and command center, allowing him to manipulate the battlefield effortlessly. The aurora borealis appeared again, painting the night sky in surreal hues of green and purple. He paused to observe, letting the rare beauty of the scene instill calm and reflection. Despite the relentless pursuit of survival and the brutality of combat, moments like this reminded him of the wilderness's enduring majesty. It was a reminder that even in chaos, beauty and clarity could be found, fueling both spirit and resolve. He crossed a narrow frozen bridge spanning a deep chasm. Every step required testing and balance, as one miscalculation could result in a fatal fall. Below, a river of partially frozen water rushed, creating a haunting roar that echoed throughout the valley. He advanced with careful precision, treating every footfall as both a tactical choice and a test of endurance. The bridge, a tenuous path, became a symbol of calculated risk and mastery over peril. The frozen forest thickened as he pressed onward, the canopy heavy with frost-laden branches that threatened collapse. He navigated carefully, each step leaving barely a trace in the snow. Enemy patrols were near, yet he remained undetected, striking quickly and withdrawing before they could react. The forest became both obstacle and ally, shaping the flow of his movements and dictating the pace of confrontation. A sudden crack echoed through the mountains as ice fractured beneath the weight of snow. He paused to assess, knowing that natural hazards could serve as both threat and tool. Using the terrain, he forced pursuing enemies into compromised positions. Rocks tumbled, snow exploded, and chaos ensued below. He moved like a shadow, unseen and untouchable, turning environmental hazards into strategic advantages. He approached a frozen plateau, wide and open, the wind cutting across with merciless intensity. Each step required stamina and concentration, the terrain both physically challenging and strategically valuable. Enemy forces attempted to regroup, unaware that every ridge, crevice, and drift had been considered in advance. He advanced methodically, using knowledge of the land and relentless skill to dictate every engagement. He paused at the edge of a small frozen lake, its glassy surface reflecting the icy landscape. The sun glinted off the ice, temporarily blinding both him and any observers below. He crouched, observing enemy movements, noting positions, and planning the next phase. The frozen lake became both a trap and a vantage point, a final proving ground where skill and strategy converged. The wind carried faint echoes of distant animals, wolves howling and birds taking flight. He paused briefly, reflecting on the connection between survival, instinct, and the natural world. The wilderness had tested him in every way, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Yet here he stood, battered but undefeated, the frozen land acknowledging his endurance and mastery through every ridge, snowdrift, and ice formation he had traversed. Snow swirled violently as a sudden gust swept across the plateau. Visibility dropped to near zero, yet he continued with deliberate precision. Each movement was calculated, every step optimized for survival and tactical advantage. He moved through chaos as if the storm itself were part of his strategy, mastering both nature and enemy simultaneously. He descended carefully from a steep ridge, navigating a labyrinth of ice and snow. Enemy forces had scattered, but their traps remained, hidden beneath snow and ice. Each hazard was neutralized with precision, turning potential danger into an opportunity. The frozen wilderness became a partner, amplifying his skill, patience, and lethal efficiency. The northern horizon began to glow as dawn approached, light spilling across jagged cliffs and frozen rivers. He stopped for a moment to absorb the scene, muscles aching, breath heavy, mind sharp. The valley, once a battlefield, now lay quiet, each ridge and frozen stream a testament to survival and unbroken will. The journey was nearing its conclusion, yet every step forward remained deliberate and measured. The frozen valley stretched endlessly under the pale morning sun, jagged cliffs and ridges casting long shadows across the snow. He moved cautiously, scanning for the faintest signs of enemy movement. His body was battered, muscles screaming, frostbite clawing at exposed skin, yet his mind remained sharp. Every ridge and hollow had been memorized, every step forward was a calculated dance with death. He approached a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on both sides. Snow-laden rocks threatened to collapse, and ice hung precariously above. Enemy forces had attempted to block the path, but he anticipated every trap. Moving with the precision of a predator, he advanced silently, striking at any obstacle before it could strike him. The frozen canyon became both stage and weapon in the unfolding battle. A sudden blast of wind sent a flurry of snow into his face, temporarily blinding him. He pressed on regardless, trusting his instincts and memory to guide him. Footprints, displaced snow, and broken branches marked the paths of previous enemy scouts. He used them to predict movements, avoiding ambushes, and turning natural hazards into advantages. Each step was deliberate, calculated, and lethal. He scaled an icy ridge overlooking the valley, the landscape sprawling like a frozen labyrinth. Enemy reinforcements moved below, unaware of his vantage point. Using loose rocks and ice shards, he created controlled avalanches, scattering forces and creating strategic chaos. The terrain amplified every decision, every movement, and every strike, turning the frozen wilderness into a perfect battlefield. Night descended, blanketing the valley in cold darkness. The aurora borealis shimmered overhead, casting ghostly light across the snow. He crouched behind a frost-coated tree, melting snow for water while remaining alert. Every shadow, every creaking branch, and every rustle in the snow demanded attention. The night amplified both danger and opportunity, requiring patience, skill, and relentless focus. A frozen river blocked his path, cracks visible beneath a thin layer of ice. One misstep could mean instant death. He tested each section carefully, calculating weight and pressure. Below, enemy scouts tried to predict his route, but he had already memorized the weaknesses in the ice. Moving with fluid precision, he crossed safely, leaving only fleeting marks that the wind would soon erase. He entered a dense, frozen forest, branches heavy with ice threatening collapse. Enemy scouts attempted ambushes, but he moved with uncanny awareness, striking before they even realized he was present. Each encounter was quick, silent, and absolute. The forest, once an obstacle, became a partner in his strategy, guiding movement, masking approach, and concealing attacks. A frozen waterfall split the canyon, cascading ice glinting in the morning sun. He scaled it carefully, testing each foothold before committing weight. Behind him, enemy movements shifted, unaware he had anticipated every response. The waterfall became both challenge and tool, offering cover, height, and strategic advantage for the final phases of engagement. The wind shifted violently, carrying the faint scent of smoke from distant fires. He approached cautiously, noting every ridge, hollow, and snowbank. These natural markers were now part of his tactical map, guiding movement and strategy. Every step forward was deliberate, each motion optimized for efficiency and safety. The wilderness had become a partner, amplifying his skill and lethal precision. He paused atop a ridge overlooking the entire valley. Enemy remnants scrambled below, trapped in terrain he had mastered. Snow and ice shifted under their weight, creating chaos that he navigated with ease. Each movement from above dictated the flow of engagement below, turning the frozen ridge into a command point. Victory was near, yet he remained vigilant, knowing that the final challenges demanded focus and patience. The aurora borealis flickered overhead again, green and purple light reflecting off icy ridges. He moved through frost-covered trees, shadows providing cover, branches concealing approach. Enemy forces remained unaware, their patrols manipulated by his foresight. Each encounter was a dance of stealth, strategy, and precision, the wilderness itself guiding his steps. He approached a frozen lake, glassy surface reflecting sunlight and distant mountains. Footsteps had to be careful, ice-thin in some areas, yet every path was calculated. Enemy remnants had laid traps beneath snow, but he navigated them flawlessly. The lake, a natural hazard, became a proving ground for both skill and courage, each step a blend of instinct, intellect, and endurance. A blizzard suddenly descended, snow and ice swirling violently. Visibility dropped to near zero, yet he pressed forward, each movement deliberate and precise. Trees, ridges, and snowbanks became markers, guiding him through chaos. Every step was optimized for efficiency, each strike measured and decisive. Even the storm itself became a tool in his relentless pursuit of survival. He climbed a jagged ridge, ice cutting at exposed skin, muscles screaming from exhaustion. Enemy scouts attempted ambushes below, unaware that his position gave him complete control. Using rocks and snow strategically, he created barriers and hazards, dictating enemy movement and flow. The ridge was now both battlefield and command center, each motion executed with lethal precision. The frozen plain stretched ahead, shimmering under early morning light. Enemy formations were broken and scattered. Every ridge, snowdrift, and frozen river bore witness to his skill and perseverance. The wilderness had tested him relentlessly, yet he had endured, mastered, and turned every obstacle into advantage. Each step forward reinforced his dominance over both the land and his adversaries. He paused near the edge of a frozen cliff, observing the vast expanse below. Smoke from destroyed enemy positions drifted across the valley, the remnants of battle frozen in time. He breathed deeply, feeling the cold bite at his lungs, muscles trembling, yet mind clear. Every ridge, frozen river, and jagged peak bore silent witness to the journey's trials, victories, and relentless pursuit of mastery. A sudden crack echoed through the ice below, signaling shifting snow and potential danger. He reacted instantly, leaping to safety while observing enemy movements. Chaos ensued as ice and snow tumbled down the cliffside, scattering any remaining forces. He moved like a shadow, unseen, untouchable, turning every natural hazard into a tactical advantage. The wind carried the scent of pine and ice as he moved through a dense forest. Branches threatened to collapse, snowbanks concealed hazards, yet he navigated flawlessly. Enemy scouts were eliminated before they could react, each strike precise and silent. The forest, once an obstacle, became an extension of his strategy, blending environmental awareness with lethal efficiency. He reached a frozen canyon, cliffs towering on either side. Enemy remnants had set traps, yet he advanced with calculated precision. Snow and ice shifted under weight, rocks tumbled, and hazards activated as designed. Each obstacle had been anticipated, each step deliberate, turning the treacherous canyon into a conduit for strategic advantage. He paused atop a ridge as dawn approached, golden light illuminating the frozen valley. Every enemy had been neutralized, every challenge overcome, every obstacle mastered. The valley lay silent, snow and ice reflecting the sunlight like a monument to perseverance, strategy, and relentless will. The journey's end was near, yet every step remained deliberate, every breath measured, every motion precise. The frozen valley lay quiet, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. He stepped carefully through the snow, muscles aching but spirit unbroken. The remnants of enemy forces were scattered across the plains, defeated yet alive, a testament to both his skill and mercy. The wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying with it the faint echoes of battles past. Each step forward felt heavy with the weight of victory and the relief of survival. He approached the final ridge, the highest point in the valley, overlooking the sprawling frozen landscape. Every trap had been triggered, every obstacle used to his advantage, and yet he remained vigilant. His breath formed clouds in the cold air as he scanned the horizon for any sign of remaining adversaries. The ridge was not just terrain, it was a symbol, the final test of endurance, strategy, and resolve. Below, a frozen river glistened under the rising sun. Enemy scouts had attempted one last desperate maneuver, but it failed. Rocks and ice shifted under their weight, forcing them into retreat. He watched silently, assessing every movement, ensuring no threat remained. The river, once a barrier, had become a stage for his mastery, demonstrating his ability to command both terrain and outcome. He paused near a snow-covered hollow, reflecting on the journey. The harsh cold, relentless adversaries, and unforgiving landscape had tested every fiber of his being. Frostbite, bruises, and exhaustion were visible marks of struggle, yet his determination and intelligence had prevailed. Every ridge, frozen tree, and icy cliff was now a witness to survival, perseverance, and triumph. A lone wolf emerged from the trees, its breath misting in the cold air. They regarded each other briefly, predator acknowledging predator. He continued his trek, sensing a silent respect from the creature. The frozen wilderness had shaped him, tested him, and now, in its quiet acknowledgement, offered closure. The wolf disappeared into the forest, leaving him alone with the aftermath of victory. He climbed one final icy slope, the wind cutting through his layers with merciless intensity. Each foothold was deliberate, each step calculated. The summit revealed the entire valley below, now serene and silent. The sun reflected off snow and ice, transforming the battlefield into a monument of endurance. His chest heaved with effort, his eyes scanning the horizon, knowing that every enemy had been accounted for and every challenge overcome. The frozen cliffs shimmered in golden light, reflecting his solitary figure. He paused, letting the enormity of survival and conquest settle in his mind. Every trap he had set, every maneuver executed, every hazard mastered now formed a tapestry of victory. The valley, once hostile, now lay peaceful, bearing silent witness to the culmination of relentless effort and strategic brilliance. He descended gently into a snow-covered forest, the crunch of his boots softened by thick frost. Branches bowed under ice, trees heavy with snow, yet he navigated flawlessly. Every path, every hollow, every natural obstacle had been anticipated. The forest, once a gauntlet, now offered passage. Every motion demonstrated mastery over environment, strategy, and instinct. The frozen lake appeared ahead, glassy and unbroken. He paused at its edge, gazing at his reflection, a solitary figure marked by struggle and endurance. The journey had demanded everything: strength, skill, intellect, and willpower. Yet in that reflection, he saw the culmination of it all: survival, mastery, and victory over both human adversaries and the relentless wilderness. A final gust of wind swept across the valley, carrying snowflakes like whispers of the battles past. He exhaled slowly, eyes closing briefly in a moment of peace. The frozen landscape, once a crucible of peril, now lay serene. Every ridge, hollow, and icy cliff bore silent witness to his triumph. The journey was complete, the enemies defeated, and the wilderness, both challenge and companion, had recognized his mastery. He walked slowly toward the distant mountains, the rising sun casting long shadows across the valley. Each step forward was deliberate, carrying both the weight of exhaustion and the pride of survival. Snow and ice reflected light like scattered diamonds, illuminating the path ahead. The wilderness had tested him at every turn, but he had endured, conquered, and emerged unbroken. He paused atop a final ridge, surveying the entirety of the valley below. Smoke from destroyed encampments drifted across the frozen plain, blending with the morning mist. Every ridge, snowdrift, and jagged cliff told the story of trials faced, enemies defeated, and obstacles overcome. The valley was silent, nature reclaiming dominion, and he stood as a solitary testament to endurance and victory. A frozen waterfall glinted in the sunlight, ice shimmering with surreal clarity. He approached it slowly, using the terrain to move undetected. Each motion was deliberate, measured, and precise. The final challenges of the journey had demanded patience, intelligence, and skill. Now, each step was a celebration of survival, the wilderness bearing witness to his unmatched mastery. The northern lights flickered faintly overhead as he moved through a frozen forest. Shadows danced across snow-laden branches, creating illusions of movement that tested perception. Yet he navigated flawlessly, a predator in harmony with his environment. Every challenge of the journey had prepared him for this moment, final passage through the wilderness, triumphant and unbroken. He crossed a narrow bridge of ice spanning a deep chasm, testing each step for stability. Below, the frozen river roared, a reminder of nature's power and danger. Yet every motion was calculated, executed with precision, and free of error. The bridge became both test and symbol, a final proving ground of skill, balance, and endurance. The valley widened, revealing open plains bathed in golden light. Enemy remnants had vanished, scattered by strategic maneuvers and the unforgiving terrain. The snow reflected the sun in blinding brilliance, a final testament to victory over adversity. Each ridge, river, and hollow had been accounted for, every hazard mastered. Survival was complete. He paused at the edge of a cliff, gazing at distant mountains where the journey began. Memories of peril, combat, and near-death experiences washed over him, each one a lesson and a mark of growth. Frost-bitten fingers brushed snow aside as he absorbed the grandeur of the frozen world. The wilderness had tested, shaped, and ultimately honored him through endurance and skill. The wind carried faint echoes of life returning, birds chirping, wolves howling, and distant streams thawing. He stood silently, acknowledging the resilience of nature and the balance between challenge and beauty. The frozen valley, once hostile, now lay peaceful and vibrant with life. The battles were over, survival achieved, and mastery confirmed. Every ridge, frozen river, and ice-coated tree bore witness to the journey's conclusion. He exhaled deeply, chest heaving, as a rare smile flickered across his face. The journey had demanded everything, strength, courage, intellect, and perseverance, but had rewarded him with clarity, survival, and mastery over both adversary and environment. Finally, he turned toward the horizon, the distant mountains glowing in sunlight. Each step was deliberate, each breath a celebration of endurance. The valley behind him remained serene, snow glinting in gold and white, the frozen wilderness acknowledging the culmination of struggle, strategy, and triumph. He moved forward, unbroken, victorious, and at peace. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the snow-covered valley. Each ridge and hollow now seemed tranquil, almost sacred, as if the land itself were honoring the struggle endured within its frozen grasp. He walked slowly, boots crunching in crisp snow, each step deliberate, savoring the stillness that followed chaos. The enemies were gone, and nature reclaimed its dominion with quiet dignity. He paused at the edge of a frozen cliff, gazing down at the winding river below. Ice glittered like shards of glass, sunlight refracting across its surface. The valley, once a battlefield of peril and strategy, now lay serene. He reflected on the journey, the victories, the close calls, and the lessons carved into his body and mind. Every scar, every bruise, every frozen fingertip told a story of survival and relentless determination. A solitary raven circled overhead, its wings cutting through the cold morning air. He watched it with detached appreciation, sensing a symbolic acknowledgement of endurance. The wilderness had tested him, stripped him to the essentials, yet also offered clarity, focus, and revelation. Each step forward had been both battle and meditation, shaping him into something sharper, stronger, and more aware than ever before. He entered a frozen glade where the snow lay untouched, shimmering under the sun. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint rustle of ice-laden branches. He crouched briefly, listening to the subtle sounds of returning wildlife, the rhythm of life slowly reasserting itself. The glade was a sanctuary, a place where both his body and spirit could finally acknowledge the peace earned through struggle. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and thawing ice. He inhaled deeply, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. Memories of battle, near death, and relentless pursuit rose unbidden, each one a reminder of endurance. Yet they no longer weighed heavily, instead, they affirmed his resilience, strategic mastery, and the hard-won victory over both adversaries and the frozen wilderness itself. He walked to the edge of a frozen lake, its glassy surface reflecting both sky and surrounding cliffs. He knelt, brushing the snow aside, and stared at his reflection. The man before him was battered and marked by trials, yet unbroken. Every ridge, frozen hollow, and icy cliff had played a role in forging this moment, a solitary figure standing in victory and quiet contemplation. A distant howl echoed through the valley, a lone wolf signaling the resurgence of life. He smiled faintly, sensing a symbolic acknowledgement from the creature. Nature, relentless and impartial, had been both adversary and teacher. Now, in its quiet recognition, he felt the culmination of his journey settle into his bones, survival, mastery, and harmony with the unforgiving landscape. He climbed one final ridge, each step deliberate, muscles aching but heart steady. Below, the valley stretched endlessly, a frozen expanse now devoid of human threat. The terrain had been conquered, every trap accounted for, and every strategy executed to perfection. The ridge offered perspective, not just of the land but of the journey itself, a testament to endurance, patience, and relentless will. He paused atop the ridge, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the cold wind wash over him. Every memory, every battle, every triumph, and every moment of doubt coalesced into clarity. The frozen valley was no longer a battlefield, it was a monument, silent yet eloquent, bearing witness to the relentless human spirit that had endured and prevailed against overwhelming odds. Finally, he descended toward the distant mountains, each step slow and purposeful. Snow sparkled in the morning light, reflecting the vastness of the journey completed. The enemies were gone, the frozen wilderness had been respected and mastered, and he walked forward, unbroken, victorious, and profoundly aware of the journey that had defined him. The morning sun climbed higher, casting a golden light across the frozen valley, turning every ridge, cliff, and snowdrift into a shimmering spectacle. He moved deliberately, boots crunching softly in the thick snow, muscles aching yet spirit resolute. Each step was measured, every motion executed with patience and awareness honed through countless trials. The once hostile landscape now lay serene, almost reverent, the scars of battle hidden beneath the pristine snow, as if the land itself had decided to honor the struggle and endurance that had transpired upon its surface. He paused near a frozen waterfall, its cascade of ice glinting in the morning sunlight like millions of tiny crystals. The roar of partially frozen water beneath the ice offered both beauty and caution, a reminder that nature remained powerful and unpredictable even after the human conflicts had ceased. He ran his gloved fingers over the ice, feeling its jagged texture and contemplating the path that had brought him here, the narrow ridges, deadly crevices, and the countless moments when instinct and skill had determined survival. It was a landscape that had tested not only physical endurance but the very essence of human resolve. The wind swept down the valley with a biting chill, carrying with it the scent of pine and frozen earth. He inhaled deeply, savoring the freshness that contrasted sharply with the memory of battle smoke and the fear-laden air of previous nights. Birds began to stir in distant trees, their wings slicing the cold air with precision. Even the wilderness seemed to reclaim its rhythm, and in this quiet resurgence of life, he felt a rare sense of peace settling into his chest. Survival had been hard-won, and the silence of the land seemed to echo the magnitude of his journey. He climbed a ridge that overlooked the expanse of the valley, the panorama stretching endlessly before him. Below, snow-covered forests and frozen rivers glistened in the early light, while distant mountains loomed like silent sentinels. Every ridge, every hollow, and every cliff held memories of confrontation, struggle, and cunning maneuvering. The valley itself seemed alive, carrying the imprints of his journey, the broken footprints of pursuit, the subtle marks of traps, and the shifting ice that had been both ally and enemy. It was a silent testament to survival and mastery over the frozen wilderness. A lone wolf appeared in the distance, moving carefully across a ridge and pausing to watch him. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and an unspoken recognition passed between them, the acknowledgement of endurance, resilience, and the raw understanding that only comes from survival in extreme conditions. He continued walking, each step deliberate, yet carried a newfound calm. The frozen wilderness, once merciless and unyielding, now seemed to accept his presence. He was no longer merely surviving, he had become part of the rhythm of the land itself. He descended slowly toward a frozen river, the ice cracking softly beneath each careful step. Below the surface, currents churned with hidden danger, reminding him that even in moments of triumph, caution remained essential. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and each exhale seemed to echo against the valley walls. He reflected on the countless decisions, split-second movements, and calculated risks that had brought him to this point. The frozen valley, once an adversary, had become a teacher, etching lessons of patience, intelligence, and precision into his very being. The forest opened into a vast clearing, snow untouched and pristine, reflecting the sunlight with almost blinding brilliance. Here, the remnants of battles were few, the chaos of conflict softened by the gentle hand of nature. He paused, feeling the enormity of the journey in his bones, the relentless testing of his strength, mind, and will. Each ridge and hollow in the distance reminded him of the battles fought, the enemies vanquished, and the unforgiving trials that had tested his limits. Yet he moved forward, each step deliberate, carrying the weight of survival with a quiet dignity. A blizzard began to stir in the distant mountains, snow driven by a cutting wind. He observed it from afar, understanding that nature still held dominion over the frozen land, that survival was never guaranteed and vigilance remained essential. Yet, for the first time, he felt a sense of mastery, not over the wilderness, but in his ability to endure, adapt, and navigate its challenges. The storm was both beautiful and terrifying, a final reminder of the formidable force he had faced and conquered in mind, body, and spirit. He paused at the edge of a frozen cliff, looking down at the valley stretching below. Every frozen river, ridge, and hollow now told the story of the journey, moments of desperation, calculated risk, and relentless determination. The snow sparkled like tiny diamonds, the sun illuminating the scars left by conflict. He inhaled deeply, letting the cold air fill his lungs, feeling a profound connection to the land that had been both adversary and ally. Here, in the stillness, he found a rare clarity. Survival was not just physical, but a mastery of patience, intelligence, and inner strength. Finally, he reached a plateau that overlooked the entire valley, every ridge and river now laid bare in golden morning light. He paused, letting exhaustion and triumph wash over him, feeling the culmination of every trial endured. The frozen wilderness, once harsh and merciless, now seemed peaceful, bearing witness to his victory. He stood alone, battered yet unbroken, the silence around him both a reward and a reflection of the relentless journey that had forged him into a master of endurance, strategy, and survival. The sun had climbed higher, turning the snow into a dazzling expanse of white and gold. Every ridge, frozen river, and ice-covered cliff shimmered like a crystal monument to endurance. He moved deliberately across the valley floor, muscles aching but spirit resolute. Each footfall was a reminder of the trials he had faced, the relentless pursuit of survival, the battles fought, and the countless obstacles overcome. The valley was quiet now, the echoes of conflict replaced by a serene silence that seemed almost sacred. He paused at the edge of a frozen forest, the branches heavy with snow threatening to collapse under their weight. Every step required careful calculation, but he welcomed the challenge. Memories of ambushes, close calls, and strategic maneuvers filled his mind. Yet in this quiet moment, the forest felt less hostile and more like a companion, each tree and hollow a testament to the lessons he had learned. Survival was no longer merely instinct, it was wisdom forged in frost and fire. A distant ridge caught the first rays of sunlight, casting long shadows across the valley. He climbed slowly, each step deliberate, muscles screaming in protest, yet his resolve never wavered. From this height, he could see the expanse of the valley, frozen rivers winding through forests, snowdrifts scattered like frozen waves, and jagged cliffs marking the horizon. Every ridge and hollow told a story of struggle, strategy, and perseverance. The land was both canvas and witness, bearing the weight of his journey in silent testimony. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the scent of pine and thawing ice. He inhaled deeply, letting the crisp, cold air fill his lungs, feeling a sense of clarity he had never known in the chaos of battle. Even in the midst of extreme adversity, moments like this reminded him of the wilderness's enduring majesty. It had tested him, shaped him, and ultimately recognized his mastery. Each movement forward was not just survival but a tribute to the skill and resilience that had carried him through. He crossed a frozen river, testing each section of ice for stability. The water below rushed with hidden power, a reminder of nature's constant, unpredictable force. Yet every motion was deliberate, executed with precision. Footprints in the snow marked the path he had taken, soon erased by the wind. The river, once an obstacle, now seemed almost ceremonial, a final passage marking the transition from struggle to reflection, from battle to peace. A blizzard began to stir in the distant mountains, snow and wind whipping across peaks and valleys. He observed it from the ridge, recognizing both its danger and beauty. The storm was a final reminder that nature was relentless, impartial, and eternal. Yet he felt no fear, instead, he moved with calm assurance, a man who had faced countless trials and emerged victorious. The blizzard, like all obstacles before it, was a challenge he had mastered through patience, intelligence, and determination. He paused at a frozen glade, snow untouched and glittering under the sun's brilliance. Silence enveloped the space, broken only by the faint sound of distant wildlife returning. Birds flitted through frost-laden branches, wolves howled far off, and the faint murmur of a distant stream echoed softly. He knelt briefly, letting the peace of the glade sink in, a stark contrast to the chaos and danger he had endured. The wilderness was reclaiming itself, and he was a solitary witness to both its resilience and his own. He climbed another ridge, each step deliberate and methodical, muscles taut and lungs burning. From this vantage point, he could see the full breadth of the frozen valley, every ridge and river now marked by the echoes of his journey. Every trap laid, every enemy encounter, every snow-covered obstacle, all bore silent witness to the endurance and skill that had carried him through. The valley was no longer a battlefield but a monument, frozen in time, honoring both struggle and mastery. A frozen waterfall caught his eye, its ice sparkling like liquid crystal. He approached carefully, noting the crevices and overhangs, each step a careful negotiation with danger. The waterfall, once an imposing obstacle, now symbolized the beauty of survival and the rewards of careful planning, patience, and determination. He traced the edges of ice with gloved hands, appreciating its frozen artistry and the way nature had both challenged and shaped him. Finally, he reached the summit of the highest ridge, the wind cutting across his face with a biting chill. The valley below stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of white, punctuated by glistening rivers, frozen forests, and jagged cliffs. He paused, letting exhaustion wash over him, but also a profound sense of achievement. Every trial faced, every enemy defeated, every near-death experience had culminated in this moment. He stood unbroken, victorious, and in harmony with the frozen wilderness that had both tested and honored him. The morning sky stretched endlessly above the frozen valley, painted with hues of soft pink and gold. He walked slowly across a snow-covered ridge, each step deliberate, his boots leaving temporary imprints soon erased by drifting snow. The wind carried a crisp, biting chill, yet it also brought clarity, a sense of serenity after the relentless chaos of the past days. Every ridge and frozen hollow seemed alive, echoing the trials endured and victories achieved, a silent witness to his perseverance. He paused beside a frozen creek, kneeling to touch the glacial water that trickled beneath a thin layer of ice. The sound was faint yet soothing, a stark contrast to the violent echoes of battle that had filled these valleys before. The journey had tested his body, mind, and spirit, leaving marks both visible and hidden, and in this quiet moment, he allowed himself to reflect on the sheer magnitude of what had been overcome. Survival was no longer just instinct, it was wisdom forged through hardship and endurance. A distant ridge shimmered in the sunlight, dusted with fresh snow that had fallen overnight. He climbed carefully, muscles screaming from exertion, yet every movement was precise and purposeful. From this vantage point, the frozen valley sprawled endlessly below him, a canvas of white interrupted by jagged cliffs, frozen rivers, and snow-laden forests. Each landmark held a memory, of battles fought, risks taken, and victories carved from the unforgiving wilderness. The land itself seemed to acknowledge his presence, quiet yet majestic, offering the ultimate reward of perspective. He moved into a snow-covered forest, the branches heavy with ice forming natural arches overhead. Every step required caution, the snow muffled sounds but concealed hidden hazards beneath. He recalled every encounter, every near miss, every careful calculation that had allowed him to survive. The forest, once an enemy in itself, now felt like an ally, a living testament to the lessons learned in patience, awareness, and adaptability. Each step forward was both a continuation and a reflection, a journey through memory as much as terrain. A frozen waterfall loomed ahead, crystalline ice glinting in the morning sun. He approached it slowly, carefully assessing each foothold, each crack, and each overhanging ledge. The waterfall had once been an obstacle, a deadly hazard that could end life in an instant. Now, it symbolized endurance, mastery, and the culmination of trials overcome. His gloved hands traced the frozen surface, appreciating its cold artistry and the perfection of nature's design, a reminder that even in danger, beauty could be found. He crossed a wide, frozen river, its surface shimmering like polished glass. Beneath the ice, the current swirled with hidden strength, a subtle reminder of nature's power. Each step required precision, focus, and courage, but he moved without hesitation, trusting both instinct and experience. The river, once a deadly barrier, now felt like a rite of passage, a final obstacle that confirmed mastery over the frozen valley and all it had demanded of him. A blizzard began to stir in the distance, snow swirling in chaotic patterns across jagged cliffs and frozen plains. He observed it from a ridge, appreciating the harsh beauty and the reminder that the wilderness remained powerful and unpredictable. Yet he felt no fear, only a quiet confidence born from countless trials, strategic foresight, and the lessons carved into muscle and mind. The storm, like all challenges before it, would be endured, observed, and ultimately respected, not feared. He paused at a glade where sunlight filtered through ice-coated branches, the forest floor sparkling like diamonds. Silence reigned, broken only by distant bird calls and the faint whisper of wind. The journey had been brutal and unrelenting, but here, in this untouched corner of the wilderness, peace seemed tangible. He knelt briefly, touching the snow, feeling the cold bite at his fingertips yet relishing the calm. Every obstacle, every struggle, every enemy faced had led to this quiet reconciliation with both nature and self. He climbed another ridge, higher than any before, the valley spreading endlessly below him. Each ridge, frozen hollow, and jagged cliff bore silent witness to the battles fought and the strategies executed. Snow sparkled like shards of glass under the sun's gaze, reflecting the enormity of the journey. Here, he understood fully that survival was more than endurance, it was mastery, adaptation, and a communion with the frozen wilderness that had both challenged and shaped him. Finally, he reached the summit of the highest ridge, the wind cutting sharply across his face. The entire valley lay below, pristine, silent, and expansive, every frozen river and jagged cliff marked with the memory of his journey. He paused, letting the enormity of what had been endured and achieved settle in his bones. Muscles ached, breath came heavy, and frost clung stubbornly to skin, yet a sense of profound accomplishment enveloped him. He stood alone, victorious, and in harmony with the frozen world that had tested him so relentlessly. The sun hung low over the frozen valley, spilling molten light across jagged cliffs and glistening snowdrifts. He walked slowly, boots sinking into the powdery snow with each deliberate step, muscles screaming from exertion yet driven by an unwavering will. The wind cut across his face, cold and unforgiving, but with it came clarity, a rare peace after the relentless trials of survival. Every ridge, frozen river, and hollowed snowbank seemed to shimmer with memory, the echoes of past battles imprinted upon the landscape like invisible scars. He paused, letting the wind whip through his hair, and allowed himself a moment to absorb the enormity of what had been endured and achieved. He descended a narrow, icy canyon, where walls of glistening ice towered on either side, and every step carried the potential for danger. Snow shifted underfoot, hidden cracks threatening to collapse, yet he moved with practiced precision. Each motion was deliberate, every footfall calculated to maintain balance and safety. Memories of ambushes, enemy traps, and the countless near misses filled his mind, a mental tapestry of trials that had shaped his reflexes, instincts, and strategic thinking. Here, in the heart of the frozen canyon, he realized the true extent of what survival demanded: resilience, intelligence, and the ability to move like a shadow through even the harshest of environments. At the edge of a frozen river, he knelt to observe the subtle movements beneath the ice. The water swirled with hidden currents, a constant reminder that danger could lurk beneath even the most serene surfaces. He touched the ice cautiously, feeling its jagged edges under gloved hands, and reflected on how every challenge had been both literal and symbolic. The river, once an obstacle threatening death, now represented mastery over fear, patience, and calculated action. Crossing it required more than strength, it required trust and instinct, knowledge of terrain, and a mind sharpened by relentless adversity. A blizzard began in the distant mountains, snow and ice whipping into chaotic spirals. He watched it from a high ridge, the storm both terrifying and mesmerizing. Its swirling patterns reflected the chaos of the battles that had come before, the unpredictability of survival, and the overwhelming forces that nature and human adversaries had combined to present. Yet he stood resolute, unshaken, a solitary figure in perfect alignment with the frozen wilderness, understanding that mastery came not from domination but from patience, observation, and adaptation. He moved through a dense forest where snow-laden branches hung heavily overhead, threatening collapse with every gust of wind. Every step required acute awareness, every sound could signal danger or opportunity. The forest had been both enemy and teacher, teaching him to read the land, anticipate threats, and move with precision. Shadows stretched long across snowbanks, revealing shapes that could hide predators or betray enemy movements. Each step was a negotiation with death itself, yet he moved gracefully, a creature of instinct and intelligence, merging seamlessly with the frozen landscape. A frozen waterfall appeared before him, towering and magnificent, its crystalline surface reflecting sunlight like liquid fire. He approached cautiously, testing each foothold and edge, knowing that one misstep could end his journey. Yet the waterfall symbolized more than danger, it was the culmination of challenges faced, obstacles overcome, and the beauty inherent in survival. He touched the ice briefly, marveling at its artistry, feeling a rare serenity as he acknowledged the intertwined nature of peril and majesty that had defined his journey. He crossed a vast frozen plateau, its surface shimmering like polished glass under the sun's rays. Each footstep left an imprint that the wind would soon erase, a reminder of the fleeting yet impactful nature of existence. The plateau stretched endlessly, punctuated by ridges and distant cliffs that told stories of both struggle and triumph. Every ridge, hollow, and snow-laden tree had shaped his journey, providing both obstacles and opportunities to refine skill, sharpen instinct, and achieve mastery over both adversaries and environment. He climbed a ridge that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. From this vantage point, he saw frozen rivers winding like silver threads, snow-covered forests standing silent, and jagged cliffs casting long shadows across the plains. Each ridge, each hollow, every ice-coated tree bore witness to his passage, marking the land with the invisible ink of survival and endurance. The sheer scale of the valley struck him, emphasizing both the challenge overcome and the triumph earned, reminding him that mastery demanded total immersion in every detail of the environment. The wind carried faint hints of pine and thawing ice as he moved through a snow-laden forest. Branches threatened to collapse under their weight, snowdrifts concealed hidden crevices, yet he navigated with near-perfect precision. The forest had been merciless, a crucible that demanded vigilance and intelligence. Yet it also offered lessons in adaptability, patience, and the silent communication between self and environment. Each step was both cautious and confident, a reflection of the balance between respect for danger and the assertion of skill. He approached a frozen lake, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting both the mountains and the sky in perfect clarity. The lake had once been a potential death trap, thin ice concealing turbulent waters beneath. Now, it stood as a monument to endurance, representing the countless calculated risks taken to navigate the frozen wilderness. He paused, gazing at his reflection, and saw the journey etched across his features, fatigue, determination, and a quiet triumph that words could never capture. A distant howl echoed through the valley, the cry of a wolf carrying over the frozen plains. He stopped to listen, sensing a subtle acknowledgement from the wilderness itself. Life, resilient and untamed, had begun to reclaim the valley after the chaos of conflict. The wolf's cry reminded him that survival was not only about overcoming human threats but harmonizing with nature, understanding its rhythms, and moving within its unyielding order. He descended into a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side, snow and ice threatening to collapse. Every movement required balance, foresight, and caution. Shadows revealed hidden dangers, rocks shifted unpredictably, yet he moved confidently, combining strength with intellect. Each obstacle was a puzzle, every motion a calculated solution. The canyon, once hostile and threatening, had become a testament to his growth, physical, mental, and spiritual, shaped by the frozen wilderness into a master of survival. At the base of the canyon, a frozen stream wound its way across the valley floor. He stepped carefully over thin ice and partially frozen water, testing each movement for stability. Beneath the surface, currents swirled with hidden strength, a reminder that danger lurked even in the calmest places. Yet every step was deliberate, executed with skill honed through countless trials. The frozen stream became both a literal and symbolic barrier, a final test of patience, perception, and endurance. He climbed again, reaching a ridge where sunlight spilled across the valley in golden brilliance. From this height, the full scale of the frozen wilderness became apparent. Ridges, forests, rivers, and cliffs stretched endlessly, each bearing traces of struggle, survival, and resilience. He paused, letting the light warm his frostbitten skin, and reflected on the journey, on the dangers faced, the strategies executed, and the strength cultivated. Here, at the apex of his passage, he felt both humility and triumph. A snowstorm began to stir in distant mountains, winds whipping ice and snow into chaotic spirals. He observed it from his vantage, appreciating the duality of danger and beauty inherent in nature. The storm mirrored the turbulence of his journey, unpredictable, relentless, and yet an integral part of the challenge. He felt a quiet connection with it, recognizing that mastery did not require domination, but understanding, patience, and the ability to move fluidly through adversity. He entered a glade where snow-covered trees formed natural arches overhead, sunlight streaming in through gaps in the canopy. The space was silent and almost sacred, broken only by the faint whisper of wind and distant wildlife. He paused, taking a deep breath, feeling the culmination of trials, victories, and lessons etched into his body and mind. The forest, once a gauntlet, now offered solace, its stillness echoing the peace that comes after relentless struggle. He approached a frozen waterfall cascading into a crystal pool below. Ice glittered like diamonds in the morning light, jagged yet beautiful, a perfect representation of both danger and reward. He touched the frozen surface, reflecting on the challenges overcome, the moments of fear, and the countless decisions that had shaped his survival. The waterfall was a final symbol of endurance and mastery, a frozen monument to the journey completed. Crossing a vast, open snowfield, he moved with caution yet confidence, aware that every step left temporary marks soon erased by the drifting snow. The expanse stretched endlessly, a testament to both the enormity of the land and the perseverance required to traverse it. Each ridge, hollow, and ice-coated tree had been a lesson, each hazard a teacher, and each successful maneuver a testament to skill, awareness, and endurance. Finally, he reached the summit of the highest peak overlooking the valley. Below, rivers shimmered, forests stretched endlessly, and cliffs cast majestic shadows across the snow. The frozen valley, once hostile and unyielding, now lay serene, silent, and almost reverent. He stood alone, exhausted yet victorious, every scar and frostbitten limb a reminder of what had been endured. The wilderness had tested him completely, yet he had emerged unbroken, a master of survival, endurance, and harmony with the frozen world. The valley lay bathed in the soft glow of late morning, every ridge and frozen hollow sparkling like glass under the sunlight. He walked slowly, letting his senses drink in the serenity that had replaced the chaos of battle. Every step carried the memory of the trials endured, the relentless cold, the enemies defeated, and the obstacles overcome. The snow crunched softly beneath his boots, a rhythm that echoed his heartbeat, steady and resolute after days of tension and exertion. He paused at the edge of a frozen cliff, gazing down at the winding river below. Ice fractured in delicate patterns, reflecting shards of sunlight like fragmented mirrors. The landscape, once hostile and perilous, now seemed almost welcoming, a silent acknowledgement of the mastery he had earned over it. Memories of ambushes and narrow escapes washed over him, yet they no longer carried fear, they carried pride, lessons learned, and a profound understanding of endurance. A lone raven flew overhead, wings cutting through the crisp morning air. Its shadow passed across the snow-laden plains, brief yet significant, a reminder that life persisted even in the harshest conditions. He continued forward, boots crunching over frozen snow, every movement deliberate and precise. The wilderness, which had once been an enemy to conquer, now felt like a partner in a grand, unspoken understanding, a testament to survival, observation, and respect for the unforgiving land. He entered a frozen glade where sunlight glimmered through ice-laden branches. The forest floor, pristine and untouched, reflected the quiet majesty of the world he had traversed. Here, amidst stillness and beauty, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, feeling the culmination of countless struggles in every ache and scar. Each tree and snowdrift bore witness to the journey, and the forest itself seemed to bow in acknowledgement of endurance and triumph. A frozen waterfall loomed nearby, cascading silently into a crystal pool. Ice glittered like fractured light, jagged yet mesmerizing in its perfection. He approached with cautious reverence, noting each overhang and crevice, aware that even beauty could conceal danger. The waterfall symbolized more than peril, it represented mastery over fear, control of instinct, and the wisdom gained through relentless trial. He rested his gloved hand against the ice, appreciating the artistry of survival etched into every surface. He crossed a wide, frozen plain, each footfall leaving a transient imprint in powdery snow. The valley stretched endlessly, interrupted only by ridges and distant cliffs, each bearing the invisible marks of the journey's trials. The wind whispered through frozen trees and snowdrifts, a subtle reminder that life persisted and that the wilderness, though harsh, thrived with its own rhythm. Every step forward was a meditation on endurance, patience, and the beauty of perseverance. He climbed another ridge, higher than any he had scaled before, every muscle trembling yet resolute. From this vantage, the valley sprawled beneath him like a frozen tapestry, each frozen river, cliff, and hollow etched with memory and struggle. Every obstacle he had overcome, the icy slopes, ambushes, and treacherous terrain, was now part of a larger picture, a testament to mastery, resilience, and the indomitable spirit that had carried him through. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of thawing pine and distant streams. He inhaled deeply, letting the crisp air fill his lungs, feeling a rare calm after relentless adversity. The frozen valley, which had been a crucible of survival, now seemed almost sacred, a place where struggle had been transmuted into wisdom, and danger into mastery. He moved with deliberate grace, aware of every ridge, hollow, and tree, yet free in the knowledge that the worst had been endured. He approached a frozen river, wide and glimmering under the sunlight. The ice was thin in places, and each step required care and precision. Yet with every deliberate motion, he felt the culmination of skill, instinct, and endurance. The river, once a threat, now represented passage, transition, and the completion of one phase of the journey. Beneath the glassy surface, currents swirled relentlessly, a reminder that survival demanded both vigilance and respect for forces beyond control. A blizzard began in distant peaks, snow spiraling in chaotic patterns across jagged cliffs. He observed it from a ridge, appreciating both its danger and its grandeur. The storm mirrored the unpredictability of his journey, the tests of intellect, strength, and patience. Yet he felt no fear, only a calm mastery, a quiet acknowledgement that the challenges faced had prepared him for every eventuality. The blizzard was a reminder that survival was as much about adaptation as endurance, and that the wilderness always demanded respect. He descended into a narrow canyon where ice-coated walls towered overhead. Each step carried risk, hidden crevices and shifting snow threatened sudden danger. Yet he moved with experience, each motion precise and deliberate. The canyon, once a crucible of peril, now felt like a testament to skill honed in adversity. Every ridge, hollow, and ice formation had been both obstacle and teacher, shaping instincts, patience, and resolve into tools for survival. At the base of the canyon, he paused beside a frozen stream, watching faint currents swirl beneath ice. He reflected on every choice, every maneuver, and every moment of intuition that had carried him this far. The stream, like life itself, was relentless, unpredictable, and often hidden beneath a fragile surface. Yet he had learned to read the patterns, anticipate the dangers, and move with both caution and confidence. Each step forward was an affirmation of mastery over both self and environment. He climbed again, reaching a ridge where sunlight spilled across the valley like molten gold. From this vantage, every detail of the frozen wilderness revealed itself, the rivers that had been crossed, cliffs that had been scaled, and ridges that had been navigated with precision. Each snowdrift, hollow, and ice formation bore witness to his perseverance. The ridge itself became a monument, a culmination of struggle, intelligence, and endurance made tangible in the frozen landscape. The wind carried faint cries of distant wildlife, signaling the slow return of life to the valley. Birds flitted through ice-laden branches, wolves howled far off, and small animals cautiously emerged from snow-laden burrows. The valley, once a stage of relentless danger, now hummed quietly with the resurgence of life. He paused to listen, appreciating the resilience of nature and the harmony achieved after conflict, sensing that the world was resuming its natural rhythm and acknowledging his journey. He approached a frozen waterfall, its crystalline edges glinting brilliantly in the sunlight. Ice formations jutted at impossible angles, and water trickled beneath the surface, creating a quiet, mesmerizing rhythm. He traced the ice with gloved fingers, contemplating the beauty and peril intertwined in every natural feature. The waterfall became a mirror of the journey itself, dangerous, complex, and awe-inspiring, symbolizing mastery, endurance, and the delicate balance between life, struggle, and survival. He crossed a vast, open plain where snow stretched endlessly, glittering in morning light. Each step left a temporary imprint, soon erased by drifting wind. The expanse reflected the enormity of the journey, every ridge and hollow telling silent stories of trials endured. Here, survival had been won not by force alone but through patience, intelligence, and an intimate understanding of the frozen world. Every movement across the plain felt purposeful, a celebration of endurance and a meditation on mastery. Finally, he reached the summit of the tallest peak overlooking the valley. Below, frozen rivers shimmered like silver threads, snow-laden forests stretched endlessly, and cliffs cast elongated shadows across the plains. He paused, breathing deeply, muscles trembling yet spirit steady. The journey, with all its trials, peril, and victories, had reached its culmination. Every scar, frostbite, and exhaustion-racked limb now testified to survival, skill, and the unyielding human will. He knelt briefly, touching snow that had borne witness to so much struggle. The cold bit through his gloves, yet he welcomed it, feeling the tangible connection to the land that had both tested and shaped him. Each ridge, hollow, and ice-covered tree symbolized a chapter of endurance, a lesson in resilience and strategy. The valley had transformed from adversary to mentor, and in its stillness, he felt the profound culmination of a journey that had demanded everything and offered insight in return. He rose slowly, surveying the valley that stretched endlessly below. Every frozen river, every ridge, every jagged cliff bore silent testimony to the journey's trials and triumphs. The wilderness had been harsh, unrelenting, and merciless, yet it had also offered clarity, beauty, and lessons that would endure long after the final footprints faded from the snow. In this moment, he understood that mastery was not merely survival, it was harmony with the environment, respect for its power, and the cultivation of strength, skill, and wisdom through adversity. He turned to face the distant horizon, where mountains glowed with the warmth of late morning sun. Every step forward now carried a sense of closure, a deliberate acknowledgement of the journey completed. The valley lay quiet, serene, and almost sacred in its stillness, a frozen monument to both struggle and triumph. He moved slowly, each step a meditation, every breath an affirmation that survival had been achieved, mastery earned, and peace attained. Finally, he began his descent toward the distant plains, each step deliberate, aware, and respectful of the land that had both challenged and shaped him. The frozen valley behind him shimmered in golden light, every ridge and hollow a silent witness to his passage. The wilderness had tested him fully, yet he had emerged unbroken, resilient, and profoundly connected to the frozen world he had traversed. Every snowflake, every gust of wind, every glint of ice became part of the story of endurance, mastery, and the quiet triumph of human will. The sun dipped lower, casting long amber shadows across the frozen valley, turning every ridge and hollow into a tapestry of light and shadow. He moved deliberately, boots crunching against the hard-packed snow, each step echoing the rhythm of endurance that had carried him through relentless trials. The wind sliced across the cliffs, sharp and cold, but with it came clarity and focus. Every ridge, frozen river, and ice-laden tree seemed alive, whispering the story of survival and the resilience required to master such an unforgiving landscape. He paused at a frozen pond, kneeling to touch the ice that concealed the rushing water beneath. The surface reflected the sky like polished glass, pristine and unbroken. Memories of narrow escapes, battles fought, and strategies executed flooded his mind, yet they no longer carried fear, only a quiet pride and deep understanding of the wilderness's demands. Survival had been brutal, yet in this reflection, he understood the lessons etched into his body, mind, and spirit. A distant ridge glowed in the fading sunlight, and he climbed carefully, muscles aching but determination unwavering. From this height, the valley sprawled endlessly, rivers like silver threads winding between snow-laden forests, cliffs casting long, cold shadows, and ice-laden plains stretching into infinity. Each ridge and hollow bore witness to the trials endured, every frozen tree and snowdrift a marker of resilience and skill. He felt both humbled and empowered, aware of the vastness of the land and the mastery he had earned. He entered a forest of towering pines, branches heavy with frost and snow. Every step demanded vigilance, snow drifted unpredictably, hiding crevices and hazards. Yet the forest, once a dangerous gauntlet, now felt like a guide, its stillness and subtle patterns offering wisdom to those attentive enough to perceive it. He moved with precision, every motion deliberate, attuned to the environment that had both tested and instructed him through endless trials. A frozen waterfall cascaded from a cliff above, ice glinting in gold as sunlight struck it. He approached with reverence, testing each footing, aware that a misstep could be fatal. Yet the waterfall symbolized more than danger, it embodied mastery, endurance, and the rewards of perseverance. Gloved hands brushed its icy surface, and for a fleeting moment, he marveled at its beauty, a perfect reflection of both peril and triumph woven into one frozen monument. He crossed a wide, open plateau where snow stretched endlessly, a blinding expanse that tested focus and stamina alike. The wind whipped across the plain, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant mountains, reminding him that survival demanded both respect and vigilance. Every step was deliberate, every movement intentional. The plateau, once an obstacle threatening exhaustion and disorientation, now became a canvas on which his journey and mastery were etched, invisible yet undeniable. He climbed another ridge, the air thinning, muscles protesting with every motion. From the summit, the entire valley revealed itself, frozen rivers winding through forests, cliffs standing like sentinels, and snow-laden ridges stretching endlessly. Each feature held memory, every frozen hollow told a story of struggle and perseverance, and he felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to the land, but to the culmination of effort, strategy, and endurance that had carried him this far. The wind shifted again, carrying distant wildlife calls, subtle yet unmistakable, signaling the return of life to the valley. Birds fluttered cautiously through icy branches, wolves howled faintly from ridges, and small animals emerged from snow-laden burrows. He paused, absorbing the resurgence of life, understanding that survival was not merely overcoming human adversaries, but achieving harmony with the relentless rhythm of nature itself. He approached a frozen river that stretched like a silver ribbon across the plain, its surface reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. The ice was uneven, partially broken in sections, and every step demanded awareness, balance, and calculated courage. Crossing it was symbolic, a final passage through the trials of endurance and mastery. Beneath the glassy surface, currents swirled, hidden yet powerful, a reminder that nature's challenges were both seen and unseen, and true skill lay in navigating both. A blizzard stirred faintly in the distance, snow spiraling chaotically from mountain peaks. He observed it calmly, appreciating both its raw danger and stark beauty. The storm mirrored the unpredictability of his journey, the unforeseen obstacles, split-second decisions, and relentless tests of both body and mind. Yet he stood unshaken, a figure of resilience shaped and tempered by every challenge, ready to endure whatever the wilderness presented without fear. He descended carefully into a narrow canyon, walls rising sharply on either side, snow threatening to slide or collapse at any misstep. Every footfall was deliberate, each motion precise, honed through countless trials. The canyon, once a crucible of peril, now felt like a teacher, offering subtle lessons in patience, perception, and strategic movement. Every ridge and hollow had been a silent guide, shaping instincts, awareness, and resilience into tools for survival and mastery over both environment and circumstance. At the canyon's base, a frozen stream meandered slowly, partially covered in ice. He stepped cautiously over thin patches, testing each motion for stability. Beneath, currents rushed with quiet force, a reminder that danger persisted even in seemingly calm spaces. Each careful step reflected not fear, but understanding, a mastery of terrain, a patience honed over days of relentless trial, and an attunement to the delicate balance of survival in the frozen wilderness. He climbed again, reaching a ridge bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. From this height, every detail of the valley revealed itself, frozen rivers glimmering like silver, cliffs casting long shadows, and snow-laden forests stretching endlessly. Each frozen hollow, ridge, and tree bore witness to the journey, every step etched invisibly into the landscape. The ridge itself became a monument, reflecting triumph, resilience, and the mastery of survival in a world that demanded everything and gave nothing freely. The wind carried subtle hints of thawing ice and pine, a faint reminder of life returning to the valley. He inhaled deeply, feeling the culmination of every trial in his body, the steady beat of his heart, and the calm of a mind finally at peace. The frozen valley, once hostile and relentless, now seemed almost reverent, acknowledging the completion of a journey that had demanded endurance,